2016. Dover, England. A truck loaded with furniture rolled off the Channel Tunnel train, but hidden inside were millions of pounds worth of liquid amphetamine. Behind this daring attempt stood a man few would suspect, Richard Wakeling, an Essex native with one leg, who masterminded one of the UK's most audacious drug smuggling plots. Within months, his empire began to collapse. By 2018, he was facing trial at Chelmsford Crown Court. Yet, on the very day it began, Wakeling vanished. He slipped out of the country, leaving his family, his home, and a pending prison sentence behind. Convicted in his absence and sentenced to 11 years, he became one of Britain's most wanted fugitives. But how does a man with such a visible disadvantage manage to evade capture for half a decade? And how did law enforcement, spread across continents, finally catch up with him in a way no one expected? Richard Wakeling was born and raised in Essex, with strong ties to the town of Brentwood. Outwardly, his early years gave little sign of the criminal path that would later define him. Like many men from the area, he lived a fairly ordinary life, but beneath the surface, Wakeling was slowly building connections that drew him closer to the world of organized crime. Essex has long been a hub for smuggling and drug trafficking due to its ports and proximity to London. For someone with ambition and the right contacts, it offered both opportunity and danger. Wakeling found his way into these networks, forming associations with figures who were already experienced in moving narcotics across borders. His disability, having only one leg, might have led some to underestimate him. Yet in reality, it became part of the contradiction that defined him. Despite this limitation, he cultivated a reputation for being resourceful, determined, and willing to take risks. By the time investigators began paying attention, Wakeling was already more than a small-time dealer. He had positioned himself within a sophisticated network that relied on international connections. He was not just selling drugs on the street, he was helping coordinate supply lines that stretched across Europe. This shift marked a turning point in his life. Instead of pursuing a conventional future, Wakeling committed himself to building influence through crime. He blended into ordinary life in Essex while playing a hidden role in a trade that fueled addiction and violence. It was this dual existence, family man on the surface, international trafficker behind the scenes, that made him both difficult to detect and deeply dangerous. His rise was not about sudden notoriety, but about calculated moves, each one pulling him further into a criminal underworld where profit outweighed the risk of capture. April 2016. A truck rolled off the Channel Tunnel train into Dover, carrying what appeared to be a standard load of furniture. On the surface, it was the kind of cargo that crossed the border every day. But hidden within this delivery was something far more valuable than chairs or tables. Packed inside were liquid containers filled with amphetamine, a powerful Class A drug with a street value running into millions of pounds. Behind this operation was Richard Wakeling. He had orchestrated the shipment using the age-old smuggler's trick of disguising contraband within everyday goods. The truck had traveled through Belgium, making a stop there before continuing into the UK. Investigators later discovered that the drugs had been supplied by contacts in the Netherlands, a country long recognized as a central hub for Europe's illegal narcotics trade. The plan was calculated but not flawless. The National Crime Agency, NCA, already tracking movements of organized crime groups, identified the suspicious cargo as it entered Dover. Officers uncovered more than 50 liters of liquid amphetamine concealed among the furniture. It was a seizure that immediately drew their attention to Wakeling and his associates. This wasn't an isolated attempt. The NCA suspected that Wakeling's group had successfully imported drugs on at least 6 previous occasions. Each trip had followed a similar pattern, with trucks moving through continental Europe before reaching the UK under the cover of legitimate loads. The April 2016 interception was the first time their operation had been decisively disrupted, and it exposed the scale of the network Wakeling was operating within. For law enforcement, this was more than a routine seizure. It represented a breakthrough in uncovering an elaborate smuggling chain that had funneled drugs into Britain for years. The evidence collected from the Dover seizure linked directly back to Wakeling, tying him to a conspiracy that reached across borders. The operation revealed the precision with which he worked. From selecting transport routes through Belgium to relying on Dutch suppliers, Wakeling was not improvising. He was running a carefully organized scheme designed to minimize risk while maximizing profit. Yet it was this same level of planning that ultimately drew the attention of investigators who recognized the hallmarks of a structured criminal enterprise. For the NCA, the Channel Tunnel seizure was both a victory and a challenge. They had stopped a major shipment, but they also knew that a figure like Wakeling would not walk away after one failed attempt. His reach was wider, his resources stronger, and his determination clear. This was the beginning of a case that would soon escalate into one of the UK's most determined hunts for a fugitive crime boss. By 2018, the case against Richard Wakeling was ready to be heard at Chelmsford Crown Court. After the seizure at Dover and months of investigation, the National Crime Agency had built a file strong enough to secure a trial. For prosecutors, this was the moment when years of intelligence work would finally lead to justice. But for Wakeling, it became the moment to make a life-changing choice. On the eve of his trial, he abandoned everything. He climbed into his white Audi Q3 and drove north, heading hundreds of miles from his home in Brentwood. He reached Scotland, then boarded a bus to Glasgow. From there, he continued his escape by taking a ferry across the Irish Sea to Belfast. It was a carefully planned route, one that showed he had been preparing for this day long before the trial began. He left behind not only his car and his house, but also his family. His disappearance was as sudden as it was decisive. In one night, he transformed from a man about to face a courtroom into a fugitive on the run. The timing could not have been more dramatic. Just as the jury was being prepared to hear the evidence, the defendant was gone. Despite his absence, the trial proceeded. English courts allow a trial to continue if the defendant deliberately avoids it, and the case against Wakeling was overwhelming. Witness statements, forensic evidence, and the record of the Dover seizure painted a clear picture of his role. He was convicted in his absence, found guilty of conspiring to import controlled drugs. The sentence was severe, 11 years in prison. The conviction made headlines, but the bigger story was his vanishing act. How had a man with such a visible disability managed to outwit authorities and slip across borders so smoothly? His disappearance left investigators with more questions than answers. What resources did he use? Who helped him? And most of all, where had he gone? In Brentwood, his house stood empty. In the court records, his name was now attached to a long prison term. But in reality, Wakeling was free, an international fugitive with every reason to keep running. For the NCA, the case had shifted from prosecution to manhunt, setting the stage for one of the most determined pursuits in recent history. For 5 long years, Richard Wakeling managed to stay one step ahead of the law. After vanishing from Britain in 2018, he resurfaced in the most unlikely of places. Hua Hin, a quiet beach town in Thailand, known more for tourists and retirees than international fugitives. On the surface, his life there seemed ordinary. He rented a modest home, kept a low profile, and blended into the community. But behind this calm exterior was a man who had become one of Britain's most wanted criminals. Wakeling's ability to survive abroad came down to deception. He relied on fake identities and forged passports, each one allowing him to cross borders and rent homes without raising suspicion. Every document was part of a carefully maintained cover, helping him vanish into the crowd of expats and travelers who filled Thailand's streets. For years, it worked. He appeared like any other foreign resident, hiding in plain sight while the world searched for him. But his reach extended far beyond Thailand. Investigators later discovered that Wakeling kept links with contacts in Ireland, Spain, and even Canada. These connections were not just social ties. They were networks that allowed him to move money, arrange support, and maintain a life on the run. The irony was striking. While Britain's justice system considered him a convicted criminal serving an 11-year sentence, he was living freely, backed by an international web of associates. Back home, the hunt for Wakeling never stopped. The National Crime Agency made him a priority target, releasing his photograph to the public and urging anyone with information to come forward. His case was featured on Crime Watch, where appeals went out to millions of viewers. Law enforcement believed that public awareness might finally break his cover, and they were right to think so. Each broadcast, each newspaper article, and each online alert added pressure, forcing Wakeling into a tighter and more cautious existence. The global scale of the manhunt reflected the seriousness of his crimes. The NCA worked closely with police forces abroad, sharing intelligence and tracking possible sightings. Every lead was pursued, from whispers of him in Spain's Costa del Sol to reports of him hiding among Irish criminal groups. Yet every time the trail seemed hot, he managed to slip away again. It was a game of patience and endurance, with law enforcement waiting for the one mistake that would finally expose him. For Wakeling, life on the run was never as secure as it appeared. Living under false names meant constant fear of discovery. Every knock at the door, every official check, every glance from a stranger could trigger suspicion. His disability made the act of blending in even more difficult. A man with one leg was not easy to forget, no matter how many passports he carried. Yet still, he managed to hold on, year after year, as if defying the odds. But beneath the illusion of safety was an unavoidable truth. Fugitives almost always slip up. And when they do, the weight of international justice is waiting. For Richard Wakeling, those 5 years of freedom were borrowed time, slowly ticking down toward the moment when everything would come crashing to an end. By February 2023, Richard Wakeling's time on the run had finally run out. After 5 years of carefully avoiding capture, he was arrested in Bangkok in one of the most unexpected ways imaginable. The man who had slipped across borders with fake passports, who had lived under false names, and who had managed to hide in plain sight, was caught while doing something as ordinary as collecting his car from a garage. Thai police, acting on intelligence shared by the UK's National Crime Agency, were waiting for him. The operation was precise and swift. Wakeling arrived at the garage, thinking only of picking up his vehicle after routine repairs. Instead, he found himself surrounded by officers who had been tracking him for weeks. For a man who had evaded justice for so long, the scene was almost surreal. Years of planning and deception unraveled in an instant. The irony of his capture was not lost on investigators. Wakeling had used fake passports to travel across countries, building a life under the radar in Thailand. He had outwitted international agencies and stayed hidden while appeals for his arrest went public on Crime Watch and across the media. Yet in the end, it was a simple, everyday act, something no criminal could plan for, that led to his downfall. The arrest marked the culmination of a global manhunt. The NCA had never let up, working closely with Thai authorities and other international partners to close in on him. Their persistence showed that no matter how far a fugitive ran, cooperation between agencies could eventually bring them to justice. Wakeling's capture was not just about one man, it was a statement. Organized crime might reach across borders, but so too does the law. Following the arrest, attention turned to his return to Britain. The extradition process began almost immediately. Despite the new identity he had tried to claim in Thailand, there was no escaping who he really was. Under guard, he was processed and prepared to face the consequences of his crimes back home. For the NCA, the arrest was a victory years in the making. For Wakeling, it was the moment when 5 years of borrowed freedom finally came to an end. In June 2023, Richard Wakeling was placed on a flight from Bangkok back to the United Kingdom. The extradition marked the final stage of a long international hunt. For 5 years, he had managed to stay one step ahead, but now, shackled and under guard, there was no escape left. On arrival, he was taken straight into custody. Within hours, he was standing once again in the shadow of Chelmsford Crown Court, the very place he had fled from in 2018. This time, there would be no chance to slip away. His conviction had already been secured years earlier, and the 11-year prison sentence awaited him. What began as an investigation into a drugs shipment had ended with the fugitive finally facing justice. For the National Crime Agency and its partners, Wakeling's return was more than just the arrest of a criminal. It symbolized the reach of law enforcement and the inevitability of justice. Despite the fake passports, the false names, and the years abroad, he had been brought back to the very courtroom he had once avoided. The message was clear: fugitives might hide, but they cannot outrun the law forever. In many ways, the story came full circle. From the docks of Dover, where the illegal shipment was seized, to the courtroom in Essex where the verdict was delivered, and finally to his extradition flight from Bangkok, the chain of events closed around him. For investigators, it was a moment of vindication. For Wakeling, it was the end of freedom and the beginning of a prison sentence he had delayed but could never escape. The story of Richard Wakeling is more than the downfall of a single criminal. It is a case that shines a light on the scale and reach of organized crime in the United Kingdom. His operation was not small-time. It involved international suppliers, complex transport routes, and millions of pounds in illegal drugs. The 2016 seizure through the Channel Tunnel showed how professional and dangerous these networks had become, and how much damage they could cause if left unchecked. For the National Crime Agency, the case became a powerful reminder of its global role. Wakeling's capture was used as an example of what the NCA calls its worldwide reach. Working with Thai police, Irish contacts, and other international partners, the agency proved that borders do not protect fugitives from justice. The irony of his arrest, caught while doing something as ordinary as picking up his car, only underlined that no matter how carefully planned, years on the run can unravel in a single moment. The legacy of this case lies in its message. Organized crime may adapt, disguise itself, and cross continents, but international cooperation makes escape harder than ever before. For fugitives like Wakeling, there is no safe hiding place. Justice may take years, but eventually it catches up. He was a one-legged man who seemed to blend into the quiet streets of Hua Hin, Thailand. Neighbors saw him as polite, ordinary, unremarkable. Yet behind that calm exterior was one of Britain's most wanted fugitives, a man who had orchestrated a multi-million-pound drug conspiracy and spent 5 years defying law enforcement across continents. This paradox, living quietly while being hunted internationally, captures the strange, often hidden face of organized crime. Richard Wakeling's story is not just about an individual. It is about the machinery of organized crime in the modern world. His network stretched from Essex to Belgium and the Netherlands, using trucks, false cover stories, and elaborate smuggling methods. It exposed how crime adapts, exploiting trade routes and international connections to flood the UK with dangerous substances. For law enforcement, it was not simply a question of catching one man. It was a test of whether borders and distance could still protect criminals in an age of global policing. The answer came slowly but firmly. From the seizure of liquid amphetamines in the Channel Tunnel to the courtroom drama of 2018. And finally the arrest in Bangkok in 2023, the story became a showcase of international cooperation. Thai officers, UK investigators, European intelligence units, each played their role in closing the net. The NCA's message of global reach was not just a slogan. Wakeling's capture proved it in real time. There is also a deep irony in the way his years on the run ended. After careful escapes, fake identities, and constant caution, it was a routine trip to collect his repaired car that brought everything crashing down. It serves as a reminder of the limits of even the most meticulous plans. No matter how far you run, one ordinary moment can unravel everything. But beyond the chase and the drama lies a broader reflection. Cases like this reveal how organized crime undermines communities, fuels addiction, and profits from human suffering. Wakeling's capture did not erase the damage caused by his operations, but it sent a clear signal. The reach of justice is long, and it does not weaken with time. As we reflect on his journey, from the suburbs of Essex to the back streets of Bangkok, From a courtroom escape to a prison cell, we return to the haunting paradox that began his story. He lived as though he could outrun justice, crossing borders and vanishing into new lives. Yet justice followed, slowly, patiently, relentlessly. In the end, the lesson is simple but profound. Crime can cross borders. It can change names, use false documents, and hide in distant countries. But justice, with all its persistence and reach, follows close behind. And sooner or later, it catches up. Stories like this remind us that the line between crime and justice is always being tested. Behind every headline lies years of investigation, countless hours of surveillance, and the determination of law enforcement who refuse to let fugitives slip away. But the question is, how many more Richard Wakelings are still out there, hiding in plain sight, waiting for their downfall? If you want to continue uncovering the darkest corners of organized crime, the rise and fall of drug empires, and the manhunts that span across borders, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Every week, we bring you gripping stories of real criminals, real investigations, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Your support helps us dive deeper into cases that shook Britain and the world. So, if you found this story eye-opening, give this video a like, share it with others who follow true crime, and join the discussion in the comments. Remember, crime never sleeps, but neither does justice. Stay with us as we continue to reveal the untold stories behind the headlines.